So today it's it's March 1st, 6:23 p.m. We are starting the Finance Committee meeting. In present is Frederick McGovern, Cheryl Burke, Tom Connolly, Drew, and as a non-voting member, it's Joe Vertrano. On our budget tonight, we have, we have acceptance of minutes, budget, discussion of wage and personnel amendments, reserve fund transfer, correspondence, public participation calendar, and as may arise. I'd like to start off with the acceptance of minutes. This would be for the minutes dated, what were they? Last
2/22.
2/22. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes that Linda sent out?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes from 2/22.
Second. Sorry.
I'll make that motion.
So I have a motion by Cheryl and a second by Tom.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will do a roll call vote on the acceptance of minutes. Cheryl?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. Okay, let's get out some of the other simpler stuff before we get into the budgets. Do we have any reserve fund transfers to discuss?
We do not.
We do not. Any correspondence, Linda?
We just have the note that Deb and Joe were appointed, as we know, by the Board of Selectmen. I'm still looking for a couple signatures, although I don't think it's anybody who's here right now on the signature pages from Sandy that she asked me to send out. And the only other thing we have is what you all got today, which was the list of firms that Charlie sent the RFP on the zoning to.
Great. Okay. All right. Is everybody okay to move on to budget, since that's basically the bulk of what our conversation is tonight?
Sure.
All right. So Sandy was nice enough to update our fiscal year 2022 budget. Basically, there's a new blue column, which would be what our numbers would be is if level funded, except for the steps, for all our line items from basically using the fiscal year 2021 voted amounts. Because the thought process that I had was, well, let's basically give everybody what they got last time and see what we have left over and say, okay, where can it fit in? Because there's so many people that want so many things. It's just, it seems more equitable to say, all right, let's just start at a level like this is what you got before. And we as a committee can vote either to do that or not. And then after we made that decision, we can say, okay, this is what we have left, and this is where we should focus our efforts. So, has everybody taken a look at or has opened the new budget that Sandy sent out?
I have not been able to find it, guys. So if you could give me a little guidance, I'll pull it right up now.
Yeah.
I entered it in the 1 point, and it's titled FY22 FinCom budget, up with the 3-1 update.
Okay, thank you. That I know I can find. Thanks very much.
Okay. Does everybody have that open?
Yes.
So it's the fiscal year 22 expense. So Sandy went ahead again, and she was nice enough to do this. So it looks, if I look at that revenue page, I assume that what we're saying is that if we, let me take a step back just to
find the revenue.
Yeah, let's talk about the
revenue.
The actual levy. If you take a look at the fiscal year 22 revenue, you'll see it says the levy fiscal year 20 limits. Now, does everybody know what the levy is? That's the first question.
Nope.
No. See, that's where I wanted to start backing up and say, okay, it's hard for new members to vote on stuff when they're not even sure what some of these definitions actually were. So Sandy or Charlie, can you explain to Joe and Tom what the levy actually is?
So the levy is what we are allowed to raise each year. So we have what's called the levy limit. The state says this is as much money as you can raise every year. And then the next year you get to raise it 2.5% from the year before, plus any new growth that the town has seen. So right now, if you looked at that spreadsheet, which I'm not sure where that went. Anyways, you'd see that we have the FY21 levy limit, and then we added the 2.5%, and then we have an estimate in there for what's going to be the new growth, and we get a new levy limit. We also add in any debt exclusion. So on capital items, like when we did the roof on the school, we voted with a 2/3 vote to do a debt exclusion, which meant that we exclude that debt from the levy limit, so it gets added on top of the levy limit. So we have a number that we have to stay at. We cannot raise any more taxes than that amount of money. And we take into account then local receipts, which is excise tax and ambulance billing, different things like that, and state aid that we get in. We take all that into account to bring us to where we need to be. So we have, our budget is, I think it's like 26 million at this point, but our levy limit is, what is it, about 18 million, Charlie, or 17 million?
18.6.
18.6, is that the number we're looking at?
Is that it?
Just so you know,
Again, oh, wait a minute, I have it right here, wait a minute. So our budget is the 26, and the levy limit is actually, yes, the 18.6 number, that's the levy limit.
Okay.
So,
Where are you finding?
so we use that number. Now, the last probably 4 or 5 years, we've left $300,000 untaxed. The Finance Committee made that a policy that they did not want to tax to that levy limit. They wanted to leave at least $300,000 on the table, if at all possible. So when we do, if you look at my page 1, my synopsis page, I'm always comparing it in 2 ways, with the full levy or with the levy less 300,000. If we increase that and use up that 300,000, what happens is the tax bills will go through the roof.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
they go
And
up
again-
every year anyways, but they will go, you'll see a huge impact if you start using that 300,000. So that's why the Finance Committee had always wanted to leave that on the table and not tax to the full levy limit.
Right. And as a board, we should make that decision. So when we have a full board, hopefully next week, when we have at least, 6 members that can vote, we will go back and say, do we want to still do that? Now, again, we've done this for many, many years. And one of the reasons that I like it is, since the town payers actually have to make the choices of what they want to pay for, if we go to town meeting and we sit there and say, hey, we can only afford X dollars for the school, and somebody says, I don't agree, I want to increase it by $150,000, and they do, well, they're going into the levy limit. The town has decided, okay, they want to use that $300,000 to fund something else. And then we don't have the problems like, well, we went over the limit and how we're going to pay for that. So you're putting the onus basically saying, hey, if you want to increase your taxes that high, go for it. But that I'm not going to do that. You know what I mean? So again, we'll set the policy. We set it every year for every budget cycle. We will make a vote at a later date, hopefully next week, so that Sandy knows, one way or the other, if we're going to try to stay within that guidance. Again, my view is this is what we've done for a long time. I don't see really need to change it, but
Right.
again, this is a new committee with a lot of new members, so I'm not going to sit there and say this is the policy and that's it. We all vote on what you want to do going
Sure.
forward. Now the levy is made primarily a property tax, right, Charlie?
Right, yeah, primarily.
Right. So I've always been I've always wondered, like with the, like for instance, like when we have these solar fields, they have these pilot things, so it's payments in lieu of property tax. So does that still go into the general fund? In other words, we're losing the property tax money for that. So does that lower the number, or do we basically collect the exact same amount of money that we were before in property tax plus the additional money?
Well, on the pilot, it gets a little weird because, of course, usually we're dealing with vacant land. So I'll give you
Right.
Franklin Street as an example. We were only going to collect $3,000 a year on it as vacant land, because there's very little frontage. It's not accessible until you put a road in and everything like that.
Right.
So you notice when Sandy's calculations, it actually is 303,000, not 300, because we also said if they're going to do a pilot, put in solar panels, we're going to collect from the pilot, and we're not going to collect from the property tax. And for that parcel, and then the 3,000 was going to have to be paid for by everybody else in town, even though it'd be like $1 per parcel,
Right.
or something.
Right.
So now, if we didn't have a pilot, we would collect property taxes on solar fields, except that the state says you can't collect property taxes on solar fields, which is why we're having this ongoing problem statewide about solar fields and property taxes, and why you have a pilot. So yeah, the pilot replaces the property taxes that we might have gotten if we could collect property tax money on solar fields.
All right. So if you have a new, let's take this, moving on to like the marijuana that's coming in with like the marijuana farm. Do they still pay the property tax, or is that shifted off to like a personal property tax?
Yeah.
Or?
No, so for the marijuana farm, a couple of things. Because I haven't gotten I haven't seen an official document. I should let you know that I've been told that the applicant is withdrawing their application for River Street. They were supposed to have a hearing with the planning board on Thursday. The secretary told me that, in fact, the law firm or the engineering firm handling it has already noted to the admin that they're going to file a notice. But let's say it was going to happen anyway, they would pay property taxes on the property for the value of the property as a marijuana farm, in addition to whatever impact fee money we would get, in addition to if it was a retail store, whatever retail sales tax we would get from it also. And I'm hearing crickets.
I think Fred just dropped out.
You jump off?
Yeah, he'll come back.
Yeah.
I hope so, because
Also, in the meantime, it looks like Jean Gallant has a question.
Yep. So Sandy, I thought that 300,000, is it the same thing? I thought that was kind of like a savings account. So if we had like an unexpected expense, we would go into that. But is it different?
It is different. It's not
Okay.
a savings account because we don't actually tax that money. So we've never collected that money. That money is just gone. What it is
I
a
get it.
cushion for the budget. So
Yeah.
as Fred was saying, if the town meeting voted over what we presented, now we have a little bit of space that we could go into. Or if all of a sudden, I mean, right now, this year, we're seeing a huge increase in our retirement account. And because of that, if the town decides we do have a little leeway before the levy limit so
Got it.
that we could use a little bit more money. But no, it's not like a savings account because we never collect the money. We never tax the people for that.
Got it.
What
Oh,
we
yeah.
do
All
have,
right.
Jean, is a stabilization account, and that is like a savings account.
That's a save. And the new growth, is that all like the dog licenses and all of that?
No.
No.
The new growth is when we have new building in town.
Right.
And so the property value of a lot will go up because now there's a house on it. Or I was thinking O'Reilly's is now finished, so that will help our new growth.
So it's
Also,
really
so
just
not
property
just the-
taxes.
Right.
Okay,
It's not
great.
just the real estate tax, but it's also the personal property, which O'Reilly's will help the personal property too. So,
The inventory.
but that's what new growth
Awesome.
is. It's when there's actual new buildings and houses being built.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
I got kicked off the internet.
Hey, Sandy, what happens with the unused levy? I see that line item there, like from the fiscal year 20 unused levy. Where does that factor in?
That's just the money that we did not collect. So it's
Gone.
nothing that it's not tangible.
Right.
It's gone. It's what we didn't charge the citizens, the residents.
Which is
It's
good.
the money we never collected. So
Right. Got it.
and not
got
even
it.
never collected, but never billed.
So
Let's put
basically,
it that way.
it's like an over budget from fiscal year 20, basically.
Well, it's not going up to that limit.
Yeah.
So if you were going to a store and they could charge you $100, but they're saying, oh, we're going to only charge you $75, they're never getting that $25. That's,
Got it.
so that's the way it is with us. We're never getting that money.
Got it.
All right.
Did I miss anything interesting?
Sussing out the budget, Fred.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So does anybody have any other questions on, where money comes from, that sort of stuff? We'll probably cover this again.
The other two categories, which are the local receipts, you talked about dogs are a different breed, little unintended. Motor vehicle excise, ambulance, building permits, fines, things like that. They all go in the local receipts pot. And we have to estimate every year how much money we're going to get. Sandy keeps track of that every single month. She has a local receipt report that she can provide you. In fact, she's done that on occasion to show you how local receipts are coming in versus the previous year, and also how much is coming in versus what we projected for this year. Because when we do set the tax rate, we also say to the state how much we think we're going to get in local receipts. And the state's going to look at that and say, well, we think you're a little bit off and you need to revise, or you're fine, we're good. But we still have to pay attention to that. Biggest example of that is over in Plimpton several years ago when Fiscal went in. They expected to see a much larger amount of motor vehicle excise tax. They didn't, because the vehicles were being leased and the bills were for another community. So they never saw that. And they overestimated the motor vehicle tax, and they ended up with a deficit because of that they had to cover. So Sandy's very good about being conservative with those numbers so we don't end up in the same place that Plimpton did. And then third's the local aid from the state, what's called the cherry sheet. Those are pretty solid numbers. We're using what the governor's budget that came out a few weeks ago. The state legislature will come out with its own budget, the House in April generally, and then the Senate will come out with a set of numbers in May. But based on past history, outside of last year, and even last year it worked out, or the year we're in it worked out, the governor's numbers are usually the worst numbers in the sense of they're most pessimistic. Numbers that we get from the governor's office almost certainly will not be, they won't be more than what we end up getting. They may be less depending on the House and Senate, but there are only two large categories, Chapter 70 and the unrestricted local aid. And the unrestricted local aid, that's set, that's done. That's not going to change. Chapter 70 might change. We'll see. It depends on what the legislature does. But given that they're under some fiscal constraints, even though overall the state revenue picture is actually pretty decent, I don't know that they're going to be putting more money in there. We'll see. But I also don't know that it'd be material to our situation. For instance, if they gave every town $25 per student, well, that means what, $17,000 for Halifax out of a $26 million budget? Not going to make a big difference in the decision.
Right. So just so I know too, just again, and I'm sorry if I'm asking too many questions, but when you look at the estimated receipts, the green column with the actual fiscal year 20 is what was spent in fiscal year 20. Fiscal year 21 is what we're estimating for this coming season, correct?
Well, the year we're in is fiscal 21.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry. So
Right.
Okay.
22.
But what we use for this budget is our FY21 estimates.
Right.
That's what we base this budget on.
Got it.
So we made some changes because we didn't know how COVID was going to affect everything. Charlie and I have been looking at that. We think that the excise tax is actually coming in a little better. We might be able to up that a little bit. But yes, the other column is what we actually received in FY20. Again, some of the things you'll see that went down, like, all right, the local options meals tax, and we usually use that for a capital item anyways, but obviously that went down. Restaurants weren't open, or we're only doing takeout. So we weren't getting the money that we had gotten in the past out of that. It will go back up, but I'm not sure how fast it will go up. So I would be reluctant to put more money, an estimate of more money in that. Definitely the excise, I could see that going up. Ambulance receipts right now, you can see that actual in FY20 was 650,000, and we estimated 550,000. Well, right now, our ambulance receipts are down. So I'm not sure that we would actually estimate more than what I have in there at the 550. When we budget, we use what we estimated in FY21, but when we set the tax rate, we make new estimates for FY22. So we have to, it's really a guessing game. We're playing a game trying to figure out what are we going to get in. So Charlie's checking out the sales tax from the state, from automobiles, people buying autos. We make an educated guess. And like Charlie said, I'm very conservative. I keep it on the lower side. I do not want to have a revenue deficit at the end of the year. That's that's something that I'm pretty strong about. But it does, your local receipts then make it, the more local receipts you get in, make it less that you actually have to tax the taxpayer.
Yep.
So our levy limit's the same. It's just, where is the money actually coming from? If state aid would go up, it would probably be golden, but it's not going to go up that much.
Yeah. So. How's the water revenue? The last I knew, there was still a lot of unpaid.
Yeah, that was going to be the question I was trying to ask exactly. I know we got a lot of big receivable there.
Yeah, I can look into that and have an answer for you next meeting on how that's doing. That's a little tricky again with COVID. We're not turning off people's water, and that's that. So I'll have to take a look and see how those receivables are doing. The water, they did well last year, but I'm not sure how we're doing this year. I'll have to look at it.
Yeah, I remember driving bored and seeing the sign, "Please pay your water bill." So I'm like, it must be bad.
Yeah, and they've asked for more labor hours next year for collections, so that they can get ahead of it. How do you come up with the 966 number, Sandy? Is that based on actual billings, or so to have some AR in it, or
the 966? I'm sure. Sorry, where are you?
The water revenue and retained earnings on the one page.
The water is that is an enterprise fund. So whatever money is being spent out of that enterprise they want to spend, we're going to get that money from the water department. It's either going to come in their revenues, which is their bills, or their retained earnings, which is equivalent to our free cash. And that number gets certified by the state every year. It's a matter of expenses that didn't, the expenditure line that didn't get spent, or the revenue line that was underestimated, if they get more revenues in than they thought, then that goes into their retained earnings. And so, but whatever they spend, it's always a wash. So if the water department's budget goes up $100,000, their revenue line goes up $100,000 because they're a self-sustaining department. They call them business accounts, business equivalent. It's almost like they're their own business. The solid waste fund is also like that, except that this year we will probably be subsidizing it some because they're not doing as well. The sale of recyclables is down. So we did talk to the selectmen at their last meeting. So the general fund is going to subsidize the recycling, the solid waste enterprise for what it costs to empty the town dumpsters, for what it costs to hold a hazardous waste day for all the residents in town, and for what it costs to do the shops collections. So that those three things come to about $35,000. So the town will subsidize the solid waste account for that. But in most cases, like with the water department pays their own share of the retirement number. They pay their own share of the health insurance. They pay for part of the audit. So they pay for their own gas and oil. So they get billed for that because the highway department pays for the gas, has a gas line. So they bill the water department for what they use. So it's supposed to be a self-sustaining fund.
Yeah. And I noticed you've got that 50,000 in water reserve fund in there that
yes.
I know that he doesn't quite realize it's there. So he had a tendency to pad in his budget and say, right, oh, well, we'll give it back if we don't spend it. And it's sort of like, I don't think he understands that he has that reserve there himself. And so there's probably a little bit in the water budget that we could pull back if we need it.
One of the things you have to remember about the water budget with the reserve fund, we had started with only 25,000, but anything that goes wrong, if we have a well go down, it's a lot of money to repair that well. So that's why we had taken their tower and well line and upped that. And we had them go with the 50,000 reserve. Now they haven't had to use it, but it's just there because our wells are getting so old. And anything that goes wrong in that.
Yeah, last I looked, we have one well down. I think that's what he told me last time.
Yeah, it may very well be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So getting back, you level funded everything using the 2021 voted numbers. With the we still have to handle things such as the step increases. What's our balance before we get into the step increases? I saw it, but now I can't find it.
Oh, all right. I didn't do a balance without the step increases, but I did. So the level funding that I did, I included steps and I included contractual things like, the special needs tuition. I left that number alone. The retirement number, we have no choice on that.
Right.
Those are the things we looked at and we said, well, we have no choice on this. We have to leave that where it is.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to check with because I wanted to find out if that number that we had, which was what's left over, was, okay, we've already handled our contractual obligations and that's the money that we can now sit there and say, okay, can we, give the money to the library and the police and the fire to maintain certification. What's left after that, that sort of stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Right. I think that if we follow the budget that Charlie and I worked out, and right now it's just rough. We've gone through and looked at it, like on the police budget. I don't know if you'll notice I took a good chunk out of their wages because they're talking about a new position. They
Right.
haven't hired that position. The selectmen haven't, I don't believe the selectmen have voted on it. So it's something that maybe they don't do that this year because it's about, well, I took about 96,000 out of that.
Mhm.
But if you follow the rough budget that Charlie and I did today, you have about 121,000 extra, which is not a lot.
No.
When you think about none of this includes any kind of pay raise for your employees.
Right.
It doesn't include the extra hours that were asked for by certain departments.
Mhm.
It does not even include any kind of an increase for the schools. Now, we know the schools also have steps that are in their contracts with their employees. We always have a very hard time getting that number. How much would it cost for just doing your steps and lanes and not doing any kind of an increase? We have a difficult time getting that number, but if we can get that, that's one of the numbers you'd want to consider because we're giving the town employees steps.
Right.
So you would want to be able to give the school employees their steps as
Which is
well.
what we did last year.
Right.
Right. So getting back, which departments do we need to have an increase for to maintain certification? Like libraries, one. Are there other departments that we're required to maintain a certification status?
Charlie, is there anything you can think of?
No, I mean, the numbers for the police and the fire, which would be the next largest departments, obviously. I mean, I know the chief is interested in getting the department certified, but it has no connection with the budget at this point.
Okay.
So, Sandy's numbers for both departments fulfill our obligations in terms of contracts. We don't have certifications for either of those. I can't think of anything else that gets certified. I mean, leave it there. Leave it at that.
Okay. I mean, this is open discussion to the board. What I was thinking is we do the 2021 numbers exactly as they were last year. We handle to make sure that library stays certified. And then whatever else is, we just leave there until we find out what that step increase is. Because I think it's going to get sucked up by that.
By the school.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think you're right. I think it will get sucked up by the school.
Right.
We're hoping that they will come back with a much better version 2.
Right.
That both them and Silver Lake. They always do, and hopefully you'll all stay on for years and you'll see the pattern that I see, but they always come out with a version 1, which is almost like a wish list. And then they come to a version 2, and then sometimes a version 3. And you'll see the numbers sort of get jockeyed around a little bit.
Sure.
But
Too high, right, Sandy?
What's important is that if we're asking the town departments not to increase hours or add positions, that we would expect them to do the same.
For sure.
Right. And that's my
You know-
concern is the school adding additional personnel when I'm seeing cuts, especially at Silver Lake,
Mhm.
and student enrollment. So,
Right.
So, are there any other concerns with regards to any specific line items? I know our law account gets crazy every year. I noticed on the agenda tonight for the school committee, there were executive session for litigation. So are we expecting a lawsuit in regards to that?
I mean,
Okay.
I assume you're right that they would expect a lawsuit, but they have their own legal budget. It doesn't-
Okay, that's what I wanted to get at. Does that affect us at all?
The only way it would affect us, and this is, I think, an extreme case, would be if somehow somebody decided they'd sue the town rather than the school department. In essence, that somehow the board of selectmen was responsible for certain actions or inactions by the town regarding who knows what. We won't go into anything.
Yeah.
Because obviously, people always ask me, are we liable for this? We're always liable for this.
Right.
Everything. Anybody can sue us anytime they want for anything they want. Doesn't mean it's a good lawsuit. It just means we'll have to spend money dealing with it.
Fighting it, sure.
Yeah. Are we more open to town suing with Gordon being on both the selectmen and the school board?
I didn't say anything, but
I don't understand how that happens.
isn't that a little conflict of interest right there?
Well, okay. Let me take a couple of different questions on that.
Yeah.
Under state law, someone can be an elected official for multiple boards and committees. There's absolutely nothing wrong legally to do that. Gordon's been very good about only wearing one hat at a time in terms of school selectmen issues.
He has been, I'll say that, yes.
Yeah, so, setting aside any other things, he's been very good about separating his roles in that. And I don't know how he handles it with Halifax versus Silver Lake, because, for instance, on the shared budget, as an example, there might be a conflict of interest of that Halifax Elementary's interest in something is different than Silver Lake's interest in something, even though he's representing Halifax in both capacities.
Yeah.
In terms of the lawsuit, no, I don't think that matters one way or the other. If there is a lawsuit about an issue that we will not discuss, whose name will not be mentioned, I don't see it mattering that Gordon is on the selectmen. The selectmen have not been dealing with anything across the street or really about any other issues that might be germane to what's been happening during the last couple of weeks.
Okay. I'm just trying to think, what our exposure is. I don't want to be surprised and find out, oh, this line item's going to go crazy. And then our reserve budget.
That's another thing Charlie and I are going to be looking at. We're looking at the data processing. We haven't put much in that as an increase, but we do have to look at whether any of the licensing has gone up or what's going on in that way. But we will be going through and making sure. And also, I think that it'd be important for the Finance Committee to get a notice out to the departments that this is what you're looking at, and relook at your budgets. If there's something that we need to know about, that's not a choice that you can't make room for in your budget, then that's something we need to know about. I saw both the police and fire budgets went up a lot.
Yeah.
But can they sort of absorb some of the increases by doing away with something else in their budget, so that, because this is where we have to be, how much is this hurting you? I think that's what's give the departments a chance to come back and say that. I mean, I'm not sure that we can change it, but
right. So what deadlines are we looking at? I really wanted to have a fuller board to make decisions such as, this is the approach that we're going to do. This is the plan on the levy limit, that sort of stuff. So I didn't really want to make those votes tonight unless I had like 6 members. So can it wait till next Monday? Assuming that we're going to get much more, a fuller board to make those decisions. Okay.
I think
so.
But you may after next Monday, you may want to start meeting a couple of times a week if things don't start moving along. Charlie, what was the date you wanted for going to print?
I'm hoping to go to press on April 8th. So the last Finance Committee meeting on a Monday would be April 5th. It usually, takes a little time to put together the final version of the warrant and send it to the press. One of the things, and it sounds like we're doing it piecemeal, but there are some things you can start at least taking votes on and getting things out of the way earlier rather than later. Obviously, you might want to, again, review the revenue projections that Sandy's provided and say, here's the number that we're working on, and here's where we are. And then say, okay, if there are a few, for instance, line items that went down, okay, done, boom, 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 get those out.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of line items that are level funded. Unless you're going to, it doesn't mean that once you vote, that it's cast in stone, but at least you can get some of these things out of the way, in that unless you're going to take a philosophy that we're now going to, because these places with the increases are so needed that we're going to ask everybody else to cut back. If you start off by voting the level funded line items, you can get those out of the way. You still, I mean, given Sandy's work on this, there's not going to be a lot of room to play.
Right.
You've all met, the school assessment, and this is just the regular line item for the elementary school, not including special ed or voc, and this Silver Lake line item, not including the debt exclusion for the the bonding, is, let's say, $10 million. 1% of that, and most of that money that Sandy has pointed out that you still have left, disappears.
Right.
And that's before general wage increases or anything else. So, I mean, one of the things you're going to learn how to do is say no.
Right.
And you're saying no a lot.
Yeah. So quick question in layman's terms. If I look at the fiscal year 22 projected revenue, less the levy is 26,051,772, and the projected asked for budget for same year is 26,376,751, right? Is that in the ultimate of layman's terms? We're looking at a $300,000 gap right there.
Yeah.
That makes sense, right?
And
so
that's without leaving any money on the table. Yes.
Right. But that's still holding the $300,000 levy, though.
No, when you hold a $300,000 levy, we're looking at a $663,000 gap.
Right.
And that's with stuff.
So when you look at that figure on your 22 revenue at the very bottom line, C70 says less the $300,000 levy is 26,051.
26 million.
Yeah, 26 million, right? And then if you take that against the 26,376, that's the simple addition I'm doing. Right?
If you go to the synopsis page, Joe.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. If you go to the synopsis page, you can see I have a section that says revenue less expenditure, raise and appropriate. And then I have a full levy column and a levy less 300,000 column.
I see it. Got it.
All right. So that's where I was coming from. Right. And then in blue, I did a column with the revisions that Charlie and I talked about today.
Got it.
So that was just to get us back into the black. And we really have to then go from there, I think. So.
Yeah.
And then could I just ask a clarifying question? So if I look at the expenditures, just to see how the numbers block out. If we look at the expenditures sheet, Sandy, the total ask in column Q is 1.42 million increase.
Well, that's
sort of line 216 on the expense line.
Yeah.
So that's the total ask, right? Of 5.7, and of that total ask, public safety and schools are $1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And schools are half of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where
That's
killing it.
Yeah, schools. Yeah, so we gotta.
And it is typical. They come in high every year, so that's why I'm really hoping that they will come down. But so at the school committee meeting, Summer asked if we would give them a number, a percentage or something to go by. It's very difficult to do that because we're not even talking percentages for anybody.
Right.
So
I don't like percentages anyways, because it's like, I could sit there and say a 1%, but 3,000 1% is a lot different than 3 million 1%.
Yeah.
And with their numbers going up every single year, if we gave them like guidance, like don't increase by more than like 1.5, well, that number is going to keep getting higher. Even though it's still 1.5.
So isn't the right thing, Fred, like you said at the beginning, it's flat plus mandates.
That's what I'm thinking.
Right.
And again, I think the board needs to vote on that next week.
Okay.
Because that's the position that we're going to take.
Yeah.
And if that's the position that we're going to take, at that point, what I would suggest we do is either that meeting or the additional meetings. We should at least start next week. And again, when we get to calendar, we will start planning out the additional meetings that we need. But I think, and again, it'll be voted on next week, that we go through the line items one by one next week and vote to level fund them
Yeah.
exactly the way they were last year, unless they're lower, at which point we
Take it.
the lower amount. That's our
Right.
first pass.
Yeah.
The second pass would then be, what do we have to do to maintain any type of certification or anything that we know we're on, anything that changes that we know that we're
Right.
going to be on the hook for contractually.
Yeah.
And then at that point, you can sit there and say, okay, this is what we have left.
Who should get
You have
it?
the option of basically sitting there and saying, okay, do we want to hold that money for now, knowing that we're going to get the step increase number from the school, and we want to try to match it to the town employees, because that's always been the policy that they try to get the same amount. So we have that little bit of money in reserve to handle that. Now, that would be my recommendation. But again, the board needs to vote as a board if that's the way we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So
Suggest that you have Sandy or myself contact Christine Neely over at Silver Lake to get a version of the elementary school budget that makes no other changes from 21 to 22. I mean, outside of special ed, because
Yeah. we can't do anything about that. So
No.
but get the step increases for the elementary school with no general wage increase. At least if you're going to, as you mentioned, run the same philosophy on school and non-school, we'll have a starting point there too.
Right.
Silver Lake's is more difficult because they have some of the same expenditures we do. Health insurance, as an example, retirement. They have their own special ed budget, and so it gets a little more difficult. They're both apples. They're unfortunately different breeds of apples, and so sometimes it's not as congruent as you'd like it to be. But at least the elementary school you can start off with.
yeah. Now, Charlie, are you aware of any additional money that might be coming down to the state from us after if the Senate passes COVID-19?
Right, but it will be just COVID. In the sense of, I think I wrote, as a possibility, let's say we needed for some reason for the 21-22 school year, additional bus runs because of COVID.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm hoping we would get reimbursed for that.
Mhm.
They needed to continue to do remote and in-person learning on September 1st. So they need additional personnel, teachers, whoever, to do that. Or then we could be reimbursed. But I think the school is going to have, if the school is thinking along those lines, then I think the school has a responsibility of saying, these are COVID-only expenses that we see the possibility that we'll have to spend the money in 21, 22, or everybody hopes will be reimbursed. I mean, the legislation at the feds will get done in the next couple of weeks, one way or the other.
Right.
Yeah, I see that the positions at the elementary school that they wanted to continue through the rest of the year. So I was kind of wondering if that's the sort of stuff that would be handled under that.
Yeah, I mean, it gets difficult because the reimbursements over here, we can't budget on the basis of reimbursement.
Yeah.
We only can budget on what we actually have in, plus whatever stabilization. I mean, that was the whole thing we're still in a state of emergency, both statewide and for Halifax. Give you an example. We're going to have the same AV company come in on May 9th or 10th or whatever it is, 10th, to handle the AV between the two rooms. Because I'm assuming in May, we're going to still be distancing by 6 feet. Maybe we won't, I don't know. But I'm assuming right now, maybe we can get reimbursed, but I can't assume we're going to get reimbursed for that expense. We're going to have to go to free cash or stabilization or something to fund that, because if we don't, we're going to have to fund it out of the tax rate straight. Same with anything school. You can't assume the reimbursement. It's great and it will show up as free cash at the end of the day later on, but you can't budget on that basis.
Right. All right. Does anybody have any other budget questions before we move on?
When will we know about the add to staff for the police?
Well, it's up to you all. I mean, in a sense, you probably want to get the information, if you haven't got it already, from the police chief saying, I need this additional person. It's going to cost this much. So I think Sandy may have some of that data. And if he's changing any number of hours of overtime or hours of overtime for the admin or whatever else, I think that's, if there's not enough detail in what was given to you by the chief, then say so. But you need to put that off on the side with everything else that everybody else is looking for and new, and concentrate on the current level of services, fund that, and then say, do we have any more money left? Whether it's 10,000 or 100,000, and then say, here's on our ask list. We're asking for new people. We're asking for more hours. We're asking for general pay increase.
Yeah.
And then you're going to, or these expenses that, for instance, police and fire want increases in, and say, well, we're going to have to pick and choose. Like I said, you're going to be saying no a lot this year. In a sense, it's almost easier saying no a lot. Why? Everybody gets the same treatment. Everybody says no. Everybody's unhappy by an equal amount.
Yeah, and that's why, Joe, I kind of like the idea of we start with the same budget that everybody had, as opposed to sitting there and saying, oh, I really want that new guy, which means I got to take $20,000, $30,000 out of the highway department. I think that's the wrong approach.
Right.
So.
Sure.
All right. So assuming that there's nothing less to talk about with budget, because again, I don't want to make these votes with regards to what our policy is going to be until next week. I'd like to move on to the calendar. We, of course, technically have a meeting scheduled for every Monday in March. It's the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, the 29th, and then we have April 5th. Well, that's 5 weeks. Now, we've got a lot to start talking about, and as mentioned, typically we're going to need to start doubling up so that we can get through what we need to get through. So does anybody have any recommendations with regards to like an additional day that we can meet, let's say next week, or, we might need to do this for 1, 2, even 3 weeks just to make sure that we get through the budget so that we've got something that we can present to Charlotte so that he can have that by the deadline that he needs to have for the warrant.
I'm pretty wide open on like a Wednesday night. Tuesdays is tough for me. Thursdays and Fridays are tough.
Okay.
I could jockey some stuff around on some of those days. But next week, Tuesday's really tough. The following week, Tuesday and Wednesday are pretty decent for me. I don't know how everybody else is, but Wednesday's a pretty good day for me.
Charlie, do you have any dates that you just can't work because you've got...
a whole bunch. I'm doing, okay, so the 9th and so next for March, we're now in March. Okay, so obviously I'm booked with you on Mondays. Done.
Yeah.
The 9th and the 23rd, I'm booked with the selectmen in the evening.
Right.
The 4th and the 18th on the Thursdays, I'm booked with the planning board at this point.
All right.
ZBA would be the 8th. I believe there's no ZBA for the Chapter 40B this month. They punched that way ahead. I think that covers my evenings.
So Wednesday looks good for you?
Wednesday's the best day of the week for me too.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, I'm good on Wednesday.
I'm good with Wednesday.
How about you, Tom?
Yeah, I've got one Wednesday where I got a hard stop. I got to teach at 7:00, but I could do before that.
Sure. Okay. So do we want to plan out like every Wednesday in March? I mean, if we get done early, we get done early.
Bang it out. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I just assume have the meetings on the book, on the calendar. That way, if, we need to have them, especially, I think especially important is the one next week and definitely the one on the 31st, because, I want to basically wrap everything by the end. I really want to be done by the end of this month. And so here it is, Charlie. So if everybody's good with Wednesdays, Linda, can you set up so we'll have our an additional Finance Committee meeting on Wednesday starting the 10th, the 10th, the 17th, the 21st, and the 31st, starting at 6:00.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you also want me to put out that email to the departments, just asking them to resubmit budgets that are level funded? Or how do you want to go
Yeah,
about
they
that?
don't actually have to resubmit.
Because they don't know it yet,
but
I don't think.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you wait until you make a vote for the policy and then send it out and say, this is what the finance committee is going to do.
So hold off till next week. Okay.
I'm thinking we hold off till Monday. We set our policies regardless of who's here. If we only have 4, well, sorry. I want a larger group before we stop setting policy, but if nobody's going to show up, we're going to have to move on.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get to town hall. I talked to Barbara today, so I know it's tough for me during the week to make it back to Halifax by 4 because I work an hour away.
Yeah.
So she said to call her later in the week and she may be able to meet me Friday morning to swear in. So I'm going to touch base with her, and if I can figure out a time either Wednesday or Thursday where I can actually make it to the town hall a little early, I'm going to try.
Okay.
But
Charlie, are there any wage and personnel amendments to discuss yet?
Not for today, no.
Nope, not for today. Do we have any public participation?
I do just want to make a mention that the Capital Planning Committee is meeting this Thursday. We have a list of articles that have already come in. We're going to try to wrap things up as quickly as far as our recommendations to the Finance Committee. So within the next, I would say 2, maybe 3 weeks at the most, we'll have recommendations for you on all the articles. That's another thing that ends up taking a lot of time for you guys to do the articles. And you can, maybe we could present them and you could almost vote on them as we present, but we'll be looking at that. And just for the new people, capital items, the articles in the town meeting warrant are funded through our free cash. And as I said before, free cash comes from the expense lines that were fully spent and the additional revenues that come in over what was estimated. So we have a very healthy free cash number this year. One of the things we do have to be a little careful of is we've spent a lot of money on our CARES funding from Plymouth County, or actually from the federal government, and we have not gotten reimbursed on everything yet. They do have the right to say, no, we're not going to pay for that, in which case the town is on the hook for it. So we've heard we've gotten some of the money back, but they're dealing with all the towns in Plymouth County. So there is a delay, but we may be saving some of that free cash aside just in case there's things that aren't being paid for by CARES. So,
Charlie, are there any public articles publicly submitted? Like, last year we had the sidewalk.
I don't think there's any outside petition article. Well, I think if there is anything, it's fairly minor. I'm not sure. Usually we get 1 or 2 petition articles from
a street light or like last year, the sidewalk. So
there's that, but also just South Coast Legal Services and also South Shore Women's Center, things like that. So
that's the standard ones.
Yeah, I'll spend a little time this week putting up a prototype warrant and get it out. So you have a better idea of where we are.
All right. So let's see. I guess we've covered everything unless somebody else has anything to discuss. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn our Finance Committee meeting tonight at 7:22.
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, can I have a roll call vote? Cheryl?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Drew?
Aye.
And myself as an aye. I'd like to thank everybody for participating tonight. I know it's a longer night. And everybody, I'll see you on next Monday.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks. Have a great week.
Hey,
Bye, folks.
Bye.